Morning crust. It's a great day to be a bread brother.
Ugh, mornings are not my jam. Or jelly.
Oh, come on. Stop loafing around.
I just woke up feeling hollow inside.
Psst, just grab one of the new Morning Uncrustables sandwiches, like Bright-Eyed Berry or Up and Apple, filled with 12 grams of protein and tons of deliciousness. Crust, what are you eating?
It's just granola, not even yogurt.
No crust, no fuss. Uncrust your mornings.
Hello everyone, Chris here. Just a quick reminder that this episode of How We're the Podcast is sponsored by LifeScore a proud principal partner of Sunderland AFC. And if you're looking to get started, they've got a cracking welcome offer for new customers. Bet £10 on sports and get £30 in free bets. Simple as that. So if you're ready to join the action, make sure you're doing it with LifeScore, the home of total betting. New members only. Bet more than £10 on sports within 14 days. Free bets valid 7 days. £20 to use on Sportsbook. £10 on Bet Builder. Terms and conditions and deposit exclusions apply. Please bet responsibly and remember, over 18s only. And now, cue the music. Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to How We're the Podcast, sponsored by LifeScore Bet. And as it's my first pod of 2026, it's my first chance to say a Happy New Year to you all. And we might not have won in our first two games of the season, but we've started 2026 as we finished 2025 with a gutsy performance that adds to the gutsy performance against Manchester City. Where the opposition know they've been in a game, and we are immensely proud of the shift that the lads have put in after the final whistle once again, which is all we can ask for. On this occasion, we came away from our first trip to Spurs' new stadium with a well-earned point. It was well and truly a game of two halves, with the home side getting the best of the opening 45 minutes and the lads taking control after the break. So, to run through a cracking result in the capital, I'm very pleased to say we have Jonny Hawley with me. Hello, Jonny.
Hello, Chris. Yeah, Happy New Year to you. Nice to hear your dulcet tones through my headset once again.
Well, that's it. How long do you say it for? Because you go back to work and you haven't spoken to someone for the first week, and they might take a bit longer, and then it gets to the 10th or something, and then they go Happy New Year, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I'll give people a grace period of a couple of days this week back at work, and then I think Wednesday onwards you're starting to look a bit. A bit Johnny come lately, if you'll pardon the expression, if you're starting to chuck the New Year's around at that point. So, yeah, I'm with you. You don't want to drag it out too long.
That's it. And yeah, I don't know about you, but with the Christmas New Year break, I don't know, you either eat too much, drink too much, or you've got too much of family or something. I don't know whether it's one of those breaks where actually sometimes you're ready to go back to the normality sometimes, isn't it?
You need a break from the break, don't you? When you get to the end of it. And I can safely say I fit into all three of those categories. Way too much to eat, way too much to drink, way too many people to see. So, yeah, I wouldn't quite say I'm looking forward to getting back to work, but it's not quite the daunting prospect it otherwise would be.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to a daily routine where I'm not dying with heartburn, if I'm quite honest, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd like to feel actually hungry before 4 p.m. again, because I'm not still full from gorging myself the night before. That could be more of a personal one than a general one, but
That's it. I look at a pastry at the moment. I've got the burn all the way down. But anyway, let's get into a cracking draw, mate. Well, let's get your initial thoughts, because look, a 1-1 draw, I thought the worst partway through the first half, but came out of it with a point.
Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? You come away and sometimes you come away from a draw, like against Man City almost, where you think, I'd have ripped your hand off for a draw before that, but the way it went, like maybe on balance we could have done better. This wasn't one of those occasions. This was one where you think, I'd have took a point beforehand, and after the first half, I would have ripped both your arms off at the shoulder joint for a point out of that game, because it didn't look like we were going to get anywhere near, did it? But thankfully, obviously, we've come away with it in the end, so happy days.
That's it. Well, anyone who will have read my preview this morning will know that I got the result bang on, so I'm pretty chuffed with that. I don't think I was seeing the game come out exactly as it went, but yeah, I went for a 1-1 draw. I thought it would frustrate them at least a little bit, and we did. But just going back to that starting 11, Jonny, I mean, did you see anything but him going in with the manager going in with the same starting 11 as the last game?
No, I was talking to my dad about it the other day, and we both pretty much said the same thing. We were like, well, who else does he even bring in if he wants to make a change? And that was without considering the fact that obviously Wilson Isidore obviously ended up not being fit enough to make the bench. So you're shorn of another option. And then, you look at the players who came on in the second half, like, Chris Rigg and the
Mundle.
name's Mundle, that's it, sorry. And you're looking at those two and you're thinking, decent options, like them as players, but who are you taking out of the 11 for either of those? You'd struggle, wouldn't you? So fitness pending, I always expected it to be pretty much the same. So I wasn't surprised with the team selection. It was always just going to be a case of saying how they actually came out the traps at the start of the game, which I'm sure we'll get onto, but maybe not as quickly as we'd have liked.
Well, saying that, because we'll get into the game, but first 5 minutes, I started to think this is all right. I thought we would, for first 5-10 minutes even, because I thought, look, we look all right. We looked like when we're on the ball, we were confident. We were trying to play it out from the back. We weren't really getting anywhere, but at least we were kind of taking our time with it. But then it just seemed to, I don't know whether it was Spurs flipping a switch or something just happened where Spurs just seemed to be on top of us and all over us. But it just seemed to suddenly happen after about 10 minutes.
It was weird, wasn't it? It felt to me like we were the architects of our own downfall to a large degree in the first half. Because, like you say, I mean, that first 5 or 10 minutes or so, there just nothing really happened for either team, did it? There was lots of breaks in play, lots of times where, particularly Robin Roofs for us, was just getting a foot on the ball and being able to stand and just take stock of the pitch for a few seconds before even having to move, never mind play a pass. So it was, it was slow, it was sluggish. But then, we just seemed to lose a bit of our discipline and composure, I think, because, Alderete was caught on the ball. I think Mukiele was caught on the ball. Roofs was almost caught on the ball at one point. Like, we were giving away daft little losses of possession and set pieces, even throw-ins, because I thought we were far too quick to allow Spurs to just win a bit of territory easily by getting the ball up. And then we were just happy to, our first option a lot of the time when we were put under a bit of pressure was to go wide, which led them naturally to being able to win those throw-ins. And they've got a long throw-in taker as well, as most teams in the league do this season. So, it just, I don't know, it felt disorganised, it felt scrappy, but it wasn't the kind of scrap where, as you say, if Spurs had fully just switched it on and swarmed us in numbers, you'd forgive that. But it wasn't, that wasn't the case. And look, none of it was too dreadful. We didn't do anything like Gabriel did for Arsenal against Bournemouth yesterday, where you just play the number 9 clean through with no keeper to beat. But it was, far too close to that for comfort, wasn't it? And I think tiredness was playing a part, but just seemed to be some poor decision making in areas of the pitch where we didn't need to let it happen.
Well, I'll remember you said tiredness, and we'll come back onto that actually in a bit. But yeah, I mean, because although Spurs did seemingly step up almost 20 yards suddenly, like I said, after 10, 15 minutes, I still thought we were really ponderous on the ball. And I find it a really strange thing. And look, in the grand context of things, look, when we get through it and towards the end, we know, of course, how much we improved and how well we played eventually. But getting into that kind of early performance in how we played, you look at the pace we had in that team. If you look at that almost as a front three with Adingra, Mayenda and Broby, and how ponderous we were on the ball at the back, sometimes I was getting frustrated and just thinking, especially because Spurs pushed up 20 yards, I was thinking, you knock the ball over the top to a Mayenda, to a Broby, to a Adingra, and get them looking behind instead of just coming out and expecting the ball. I thought we could have turned their defence by just a direct ball forward.
Yeah, but the options weren't even there, were they? Because, listen, I don't want to dig out either of the wingers or whatever we want to call them in our system, because players have about 5 positions. But it's not like I'm saying it's their fault. But Adingra in particular, there were a lot of times in that first half where he's way too close to Dennis Serkin. Now, I don't know whether you would say that was, an instruction from the manager. Maybe it was just a little bit of where players aren't quite, on the same wavelength as each other from minute one. But he was very close, which meant that whenever the ball was played out to the left-hand side, as in when we're playing out from the back, it means Adingra's very close to Serkin, so they're playing little passes to each other. It's very easy for Spurs to crowd them out at that point, which happened a few times. And then, like you say, it means that you lose that option of then being able to go that sort of channel ball that we had so much success with against Man City. I mean, how many times were Roofs, Mukiele or Alderete against City, either finding a Sunderland player or getting close to finding a Sunderland player, and then Brobby ended up with that chance against City. That just didn't seem to be on display today. And again, like, I do think that you can point to the lack of rotation as playing a part, but I also just think that there was far too big of a gap between players in certain parts of the pitch and far too small in others. So like I say, Adingra and Sirkin really close together. Mayenda, to his credit, I do think tried to at times get close to Brobby and help him out. He also pulled a bit wider. And Trey Hume was getting nicely forward on the right-hand side at times. But then, it felt like if Hume got forward, there was space for them to attack Geertruida. And when he didn't have Hume to drop in and help, and obviously he then became a weak point, but that area of the pitch became something Spurs could hit. So it felt almost like we were playing a bit of whack-a-mole, where every time we tried to address one bit of the pitch, we opened up a gap somewhere else. And I think you've got to give some credit to Spurs because they did manage to exploit those areas to a degree in the first half. And, Richarlison had moments, either chances or moments where he was threatening to get in behind, which were half us leaving the space, but credit to them, half them trying to exploit it.
Yeah. You might give us a bulletin for my red and white glasses here, Johnny, but I was watching the game thinking, especially when Spurs were on top, I kept thinking it was about how sluggish we were rather than how good Spurs were. And actually, I was thinking, even though they were on top, I kept thinking these are there for the taking.
Well, absolutely. And that's what would have made it so frustrating, wouldn't it, if we hadn't come away with something out of the game? Because as poor as we were in the first half, and particularly for the goal, which again we'll get onto, but, as lackadaisical, I think is how I would sum that first half up. Like, it was all stemming from us, because I think if we were at it to not even the level we were against Man City, but if we were at it to the level we were against Brighton the other week or somebody like that, I think we'd have had loads more joy, because they, as I say, you've got to give them some credit because they identified where the weak points were appearing in the team at times, and they did try and overload those areas, but they didn't have to do much, did they? There were times where, not that people were lazy to put a foot in, but I think sometimes where maybe there would be a defender who was just in two minds about whether to fully commit to a press or whether to drop. Because I think you could see actually throughout the game, us and Spurs did very similar things out of possession, where there would be an initial fairly high press. And I think at times we had sort of 4 and 5 men pushing onto the Spurs defence, with Mayenda tucking into form a front two with Brobby, and then Hume coming up to provide support from that, hybrid position he plays. And Spurs did similar, but then there was a clear distinction between the first press, and then once that's been beaten, we drop and we get into shape and we become compact. So I just wonder whether maybe there was, again, like at times, a bit of wires crossing or just a little bit of a lack of fluidity where players were struggling to bounce between those stages of trying to win the ball back versus then obviously sitting deeper and restricting the space. So yeah, it was disjointed, as I said before, summed it up quite well as well, I think, because Reggie loves talking about his connections, doesn't he? And I just think you could see that some of those connections between, whether it's centre-back and centre-back, full-back and winger, even I thought Granit Xhaka and Enzo Lafay, who are two players who usually seem to be so switched on together, there were moments where even they almost were like one of them would be looking for the other one when they're on the ball, not sure where the easy pass was going to be. And yeah, those small little things all over the pitch can add up quickly, can't they? And result in the kind of display that we saw.
Yeah. And I don't know if you noticed, Mukiele gave Alderete a right roasting just before half time. And I'm not sure I've ever seen him like that to another Sunderland player. But
it tells you how brave Mukiele is, by the way, because I would not be saying that to Alderete.
No, he punches people just from the bench, doesn't he? Never mind anything else. But yeah, it was about 15 minutes though. And it's funny because I thought Xhaka, I think, during AFCON, when he's maybe not kind of surrounded by the familiar maybe set up and faces around him, you notice after about 15 minutes, we were really under the cosh. Spurs kept breaking. We kept almost kind of giving them opportunities to break, which I'll come on to in a second. But there was a point where we got possession and it looked like we were going to break. I think it was down the left with the Adingra. And you could almost hear Xhaka shouting, just bring me back the ball, just give me the ball. And he just started passing it between centre-halves, full-backs, getting it back off Lafay. And we just spent about 3 or 4 minutes with possession of the ball. And that was all about Xhaka just saying, right, we know what's happening here. Let me just calm all this down. Let's keep the ball and let's take the pressure off a bit.
It was very noticeable, that, wasn't it? Yeah, it was It was really needed as well in the context of the game, because Spurs were getting joy when they turned the game into something a bit more frantic. You know, they weren't playing passes through the lines and, you know, breaking us down with triangles and stuff and clever little runs. There was a lot of long balls, which you wouldn't have expected to work against Mukiele and Alderete when theoretically the focal point was Richarlison, who's not exactly a target man. But again, I think that speaks to how off the pace we were, because those long balls shouldn't have worked the way that the two teams were set up. It was because of those gaps that were appearing. And yeah, we needed, didn't we, to just try and take that sting out of it a little bit and stop them, because also Brobby was struggling to hold the ball up a lot because the balls up to him were poor. So then it was coming back quickly, whereas when we got our foot on it, they can't just leave 5 men up.
Mayenda's first touch as well at times in that first half. It kept bouncing off of me. It didn't really give us. But I just wanted to touch on that a little bit, because I think that one of the kind of patterns of that first half was us giving Spurs possession around the halfway line. But actually, just build off what you said as well about spacing behind. It seemed like we were doing this weird combination of giving the ball away, you know, maybe slightly an hour and a half around the halfway line, but we were combining that with a really high line.
It didn't really make sense to me, I'll be honest, in the opening probably half an hour of the game, I think. The way that, like I say, there was that obvious difference between the way we wanted to get at them sort of in the first few minutes or first 30 seconds when the ball's turned over, where we were getting high and trying to, you know, get bodies up and support our front line and winning the ball back. And if you're going to do that, that's absolutely fine, right? And the way that we were dropping into position when that didn't work, you know, I can totally see the strategy. I think it makes perfect sense. But as you say, we didn't want to commit enough to either of them when we were getting people forward. And as you say, then when we were trying to get the ball forward, the same symptoms were creeping in, whether it was on the ball or off the ball. When we were getting the ball up towards the front line, we weren't putting men around them even to win the second balls if we'd won the first one, because you can forgive not winning the first challenge when you're putting balls like that up towards a target man. You know, Brobby isn't going to win every header or whoever the ball goes to, but what they can do is be physical, be a nuisance, get in the way, and then the defender might win the header, but it spoons upwards or it goes off at an angle or it just drops at feet. And you need to have the men around the ball to be able to take advantage of that. And that's something we're normally brilliant at. I mean, think of how many times against Manchester City the second balls were dropping loose and there was a red and white shirt pouncing on it, whether it was from Haaland or whether it was from deeper. But today that just wasn't the case in the first half. There was a lot of times where there just wasn't anybody close, or there were times where whoever was close wasn't reacting quickly enough and wasn't anticipating the second ball, which I don't think Lebris will be very happy about that, because it's been quite fundamental to the way we've played all season under him. So I think he'll have looked at that and thought that in the second half, we've got to find ways to minimise the spaces between our players. Otherwise, we're going to get passed off the pitch.
Yeah, and that's it. We did go behind on the half-hour mark. And again, you said what we're normally brilliant at there, Johnny. And again, something else we're normally brilliant at is defending corners. And this one was just so bizarre. Came to the, really kind of deep one to the back post. And potentially, Alderete, I think, thought he was fouled at the back post, being held on to, so he couldn't get out to Romero, who put the ball back into the box to Van de Ven, who always reminds me of Men with Ven from the Peep Show, but who put the ball back into the box, and Davies put it away from close range. But the replay was really weird, Johnny, when I watched it back. That especially when it went into slow motion, not one Sunderland player moved throughout the whole thing.
It was so weird, wasn't it? Like, just as a visual experience watching the replay of that goal, you just feel like what is happening? The fact that was it Romero at the back post, wasn't it, who took it down?
I think so. Yeah.
Romero has the time to take a touch on his chest. He's actually off balance, so he has to steady himself first and then get his head up and play a pass. And still in that time, a Sunderland player's not managed to get round the back post and close him down. That in and of itself is already abjectly poor defending and just is unacceptable and can't happen again. Then it goes to Van de Ven, who himself is unmarked. So he then swings a foot through it. And when you see the slow motion angle from behind Van de Ven, it's like the defence just parts and allows Ben Davies to be the sole man in the 6-yard box anywhere near it. And then he's just got the simplest of finishes, doesn't he? You know, he's almost impossible to miss from there. But yeah, it was strange. I think 3 failures for me. Number 1 is not to mark Romero in the first place at the back stick. Number 2 is not to close down. This is kind of 2 in 1, but not to close him or Van de Ven down before they managed to get the ball played out of feet. And then the third mistake is to have Ben Davies stood, you know, listen, I was going to say loads of space. There's not that much space in a 6-yard box, but there was more space there than there should have been for him. And, you know, if I was Robin Roofs there, I'd be absolutely furious because if you remember against Man City, you know, when they had that disallowed goal after 5 minutes, Roofs was going ballistic at the defence then as well because they'd allowed Bernardo Silva to ghost into the middle of the 6-yard box. And what have we done today? We've let Ben Davies ghost into the middle of the 6-yard box. So that's something that we've got to stamp out pretty quick. But yeah, that was very un-Sunderland of a way to concede a goal and a bit of a kick in the teeth, really.
Yeah, that's it. And so the last 15 minutes or so, or 20 minutes, including a bit of stoppage time of the first half, was pretty flat, as we've been talking about. And although Spurs didn't really create much else, neither did we. So I suppose half-time is as good a time as any to have a quick break. So we'll be back very soon. And welcome back to Howie, the podcast sponsored by LiveScore Bet. And we've covered the first half, which was pretty dreary and a bit flat. But I just wanted to ask you, Johnny, because I think a lot of people just went, the players look knackered. And they did. I mean, that's what was kind of coming off the first half performance. That's how you felt. But do you think there's an element of, you know, when we have a big game with that sort of atmosphere against Manchester City, where the players feed off that energy that comes from the home crowd, that they almost have to kind of get back into less familiar surroundings, and there's nothing to feed off, and they've got to almost produce their own kind of energy, if you like.
I think that's almost certainly going to play a factor, isn't it? Like, you can't go from the cauldron of noise that the Stadium of Light became in the second half of that City game and then go into, obviously, enemy territory effectively in an away game and not notice that, you know, there's obviously a different feel to the game. There's a different sense of occasion. You know, last game was a 8 p.m. kickoff on New Year's Day, under the lights, all the rest of it. This is almost like your sort of standard run-of-the-mill Sunday afternoon Premier League away game. And on top of that, you add in the fact that Tottenham themselves are not on a great run, obviously just off the back of a bore 0-0 draw against Brentford, where I think the away end were booing the team off the pitch, which it's never a good sign when you manage to alienate the away support. So it wasn't just the fact that we weren't in front of our fans again. It was such a sterile atmosphere. You know, you could tell even just watching it on the telly in that second half, like the Spurs supporters were quiet and there was nothing for anybody to feed off in that ground. So I imagine that it was not that should be an excuse not to play well, but it robs you of that natural adrenaline boost that you can get during the game when you've got your home fans behind you.
Yeah. Especially that the type of game that the Manchester City game was, with the atmosphere, what happened before the game, obviously with the first game of the Stadium of Light in the New Year, when everybody gave their tributes, and then there was that energy in the ground for them to feed on it. But they did seemingly have a word and just say, well, look, this Spurs side are there for the taking, because it was clear from the off who were the best side in that second half. I mean, we came out and had a couple of half chances in the first 5 minutes, and you know, I was writing notes down after kind of about 5-10 minutes, seeing much better, higher tempo, and you could see Spurs were rattled. But I almost think that, again, what I was talking about in that first half, rather than Spurs kind of almost thinking, oh, well, we've won it and taken their foot off, this was just us almost performing like we can.
Yeah, it was a reversion to the mean from us more than anything from Spurs. Totally agree. I think you could see, even just in some of the individual players, they seem to have the tails up a bit more. You know, there were moments where Mayenda was receiving the ball on the half turn instead of with his back to goal, which is already a big difference. And he was able to actually fashion himself a couple of yards of space, or just naturally had a bit of space to drive into. So he perked up and he was out helping us get further up the pitch. I thought that the midfield in general just looked calmer and more composed. Granit Xhaka was able to get his foot on the ball again a bit more. I thought Enzo Lefebvre grew into the game massively because he, in the first half, just didn't have any joy, did he? Even the few times he did get the ball to feet, there was no movement around him. Whereas in the second half, that all changed. And so I think the defence was a bit more assured. They weren't being put under as much pressure. The midfield were then allowed to be able to look forward a bit more and be a bit more positive, which in turn then allowed the front three to license to roam a bit more and move and try and drag Spurs out of position. Because I thought in the first half, they dragged us out of position. And in the second half, we started dragging them out of position, which is what obviously then brings you the spaces to get you up the pitch. And also it just puts them under a bit of pressure, which makes them make mistakes. Because again, we said in the first half how many times we gave the ball away under no pressure. In the second half, those mistakes were starting to creep in the other direction. And you could just feel, couldn't you? Like it's a cliche, but you could feel the momentum starting to shift. You just knew that it was coming for Sunderland eventually, and we had to just keep plugging away.
Yeah, well, that's it. Exactly what you mentioned there, Johnny, when we put the pressure on them and they started making similar mistakes to what we were making in the first half. And after about 10 minutes of the second half, Romero made that mistake. And I think he tried to play a back pass. He tried to do something weird. It was some sort of scissor kick he tried. And it went half the distance that he wanted it to, I think. And Brian Broby was on it. I thought he was going to get clean through and just charge forward, but he seemed to check back, wait for Mayenda, and then I think it ended up back to Brian Broby, and he shot hit the outside of the post, and I think it took a deflection. I think the defender got so who knows where the ball would have went, where his shot was going to go. I would have liked to have seen a shot from behind his the strike that he did to see if it was going to go in the far corner or whatever. But
Yeah.
he seemed to be, it was hands on his head time. He was thinking it was a bit of a good chance. But what do you think of that chance, as well as this partnership that Brian Broby and Mayenda are kind of creating between themselves? Because, last season, he kind of experimented a little bit with the 4-4-2, where we attacked with a 4-4-2. And those players took up those positions as soon as we had possession. Now, it seems like he's done it now. Whether you could say, has he just tried to fit those in because it's AFCON? He could do different things with Mayenda out wide, but he seemingly said, no, try and get that partnership going. So how do you see that working?
I think it works as well as it does because of Trey Hume, but I'll put a pin in that and come back to it because we'll talk about the chance first. The chance itself, I thought, was a really good demonstration of why pairing somebody with Brian Broby can be so effective, and why Mayenda in particular is a good option for that, because he finally does what we weren't doing in the first half. He gets close to him, and almost too close at first, because you almost wonder if they're going to get in each other's way. But, Broby has the ball at first. He gives it to Mayenda, but he's clever with his movement as well. Broby peels off and he runs behind Mayenda round to the outside, so it's impossible for one of the Spurs defenders to get touch tight to him, block him off, get in the way of the pass. Because it would have been easy as well for Broby to just get his head down and drive at goal when he first wins the ball. But he doesn't. He plays the pass. Mayenda, then credit to him as well. It almost opens up to a shooting opportunity for Mayenda, which I'm thinking back to Old Trafford. That version of Mayenda might have just swung his boot through it. But this Mayenda plays a nice little weighted ball for Broby. And then, like you say, it's fine margins when he finally gets his shot away. And who knows what would have happened if the defender didn't get a touch. But that was a much better use of the physical talent we've got up that end of the pitch. We've got a bit of pace, like you said, and we put it to good effect there because we had Spurs backpedaling. And there's nothing worse as a defender, is there, than when you're running back towards your own goal, trying to stop somebody bearing down on you. So, and we actually saw a little bit from Broby again just after that, I think he was offside actually in the build-up, but, the Mundle wins a header, then it comes off Mundle's back, really. And then Broby picks up the loose ball and he's able to lay one off to Trey Hume, who gets his shot away. That was another good example of Broby being able to bring people into the game as long as you're up, close to him in the box. So yeah, that Mayenda chance, Mayenda and Broby chance was a really good one. The reason I think Trey Hume's really important for it is because we see when Mayenda gets close to Broby and drifts inside, he doesn't mind dropping a bit. He's happy to get close, be central, but be the one who's the second man, the second striker almost. And because Trey Hume plays the role that he does where he can push so high on the right-hand side, that means that what we can do is, obviously Mayenda lines up ostensibly on the right wing because out of possession you can't have two up front. But then when Mayenda pushes inside, Hume goes up on the right-hand side, becomes an auxiliary winger, and then it allows any of the three of Xhaka, Lafay, and even Getrauda who can push in and help cement the midfield position, which allows Mayenda then to just occupy that totally free role. And then once he's come inside, then he can drift and he can pop up in pockets of space or he can look to swivel in behind without Hume being able to cover up and down all day long like he does on that right-hand side. I don't think you've got necessarily the defensive flexibility to play Mayenda in a lot of games. But because of the way that Labris has managed to find this system, we've managed to start making it work. So you never know. Could be the seeds of a lovely partnership blooming there.
Yeah, that's it. Well, the two changes the manager made were on 58 minutes or roughly, where Mundle came on for Serkin. Then just after the hour, when Ballard came on for Adingra. Now, I thought these were really good substitutions, and actually we had the momentum. And there's this worry that when you do have a bit of momentum, you think, okay, well, when you make changes, does that go down a little bit? Does Spurs get back into it because you're starting to make changes? But actually, I thought that even though kind of that second one, especially when Ballard came on for Adingra, you kind of think, well, Ballard could give us the edge on attacking set pieces. But it was an attacking change by bringing Ballard on for Adingra. Gertruda pushed up a little bit more. But I thought that the changes were timed perfectly, and it almost pushed us up the pitch by making those changes. And it just seemed, again, these changes to have, you actually almost saw the impact straight away that these two changes had.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you cast your mind back to Old Trafford again, and when Dan Ballard came off the bench for, I think it was for Adingra at that time as well, when we had to change shape after the early poor start. And that ended up being quite an attacking change, really, because it helped us get up the pitch and we started having chat. Ballard himself, didn't he, had a chance near the end of that first half at Old Trafford. So in some ways it was reminiscent of that, because you're right, it's easy to look at it on paper and go, centre-half coming on for a winger, that's a defensive change. But again, because of the way Labris has set the team up, it allowed us to put Mukiele back to right back, where he was given licence to get forward and he started to see joy down the right-hand side. It meant that you could shuffle the pack in terms of the middle of the pitch again, because you've got a little bit more solidity in there with somebody like Ballard, who we all know how brilliant he is 1v1 as a defender. And I think something a little bit more unique about Ballard is he's so aggressive in challenges and he's so desperate to go and win 50-50s, not just to, prevent people getting behind him. Much like we saw from Mukiele and Alderete against Haaland the other day, sorry. Ballard was, he puts his head in front of stuff. That helps keep the momentum. How many times have we said that Sunderland fans love seeing a challenger go in or, defender win a header or whatever? Ballard gives you that in spades, whereas, pick a name, but you could bring on a lot of centre-backs in the Premier League who could be positionally brilliant and they're going to not let you down and not concede a goal, but they're certainly not going to help you attacking momentum as you go up the pitch in open play. But Ballard gives you that. And then, like you said as well, it's not just an attacking change in that sense. Also, he helps you on set pieces. He helps you in the opposition box. We all know how brilliant he is as a weapon from corners and free kicks and long throws. So I think that more than anything, that change helped us, I think. Because Adingra as well, to be fair to him, there wasn't much he could have done in that game. He wasn't given a lot of service in good areas, but he was ineffective, wasn't he? So when you take somebody off who's having a poor game, you just introduce an extra headache for the opposition.
Yeah, we'll get on to the goal in a second, but we're talking about Sunderland having all the momentum, Sunderland having these half chances. You mentioned that Hume one where I think that the keeper tipped over the bar. And I think there was one just before the goal, about a minute before the goal, where Enzo Lafay hit the bottom of the post with a header. And I mentioned that kind of that outside of the post chance in the first half. And that you're kind of looking at these chances and they're all kind of, shots from the edge of the box almost and half chances. And you were educating me about XG before the game. I'm certainly in the Martin O'Neill camp about XG, but it does give an idea of what's going on. But should it be a concern to us that we had all of that territory in that second half, and we're putting the pressure on them. But really, in terms of what we created, you can almost say we created nothing, really. There was no clear-cut chance there where you said, certainly before the goal, where you think we should have scored there.
Look, it's a debate that's going to rumble on, I think, for the rest of this season, at least, isn't it? About the chance creation and about the goal scoring. I'd be a lot more worried if we'd put in the same level of performance in front of goal with a full team. I'll just, people can complain about it being an excuse or whatever, but when you're missing as many players as we are, just by sticking Noah Siddiqui in that team, does it become easier for us to get up the pitch when we've had Spurs in our half? Do we manage to create better opportunities just by finding it easier to get, more bodies forward and break at higher pace? I think yes, but, we'll never know. So I'm not overly concerned. But again, it is still an ongoing issue. Like, it's something that eventually, sooner or later, does need to be addressed. I still think it's better to be in the position we're in, where your defence is so solid and, maybe you've got improvements to make going forward. But yeah, there were times in that second half where I think more streetwise teams and more ruthless teams than Sunderland probably do, if not score a goal, at least create a good chance. There were the odd moments where a fullback was beaten or a gap opened up between a centre-half and a fullback, and maybe a canny player just spots a pass a bit earlier and slides one through. Could Enzo Lefebvre do that a little bit more for us? Could Granit Xhaka do that a little bit more? I think probably the answer is yes. But in today's game in particular, I do think we actually, for once, when we did manage to get towards that final third, I think we were a bit more efficient at turning those forays into the final third into entries into the box, into shots, into half chances. Because it was never going to be a game of loads of chances today. Like, for all that everyone seems to slag off Thomas Frank now this season, he's totally lost his flavour of the month membership. He still sets out a bloody well-organised team, and they have got some very, very good players in there still. I mean, Mickey van der Ven and Sergio Romero, they're a very good central defensive partnership, and Bentancur in front of them. Like, they're not just going to give you space. So I do think it's definitely something to work on, but it's not panic stations.
Yeah, well, that's it. We'll get on to the goal, because what a goal, by the way. Absolutely cracking. Xhaka starting it off, I think, and Michele getting the ball and playing it into Brian Broby. Brilliant 1-2 with Enzo Lefebvre. Brilliant touch from Enzo Lefebvre. So I think it's all about the finish, this one, isn't it, Johnny? On his left foot. I mean, the keeper didn't move. I was kind of almost in shock, because I thought you knew he was going to take the shot on, but I just wasn't expecting that. But just on Brian Broby, I think throughout that second half, and I think when he first started to come on and first start games, you could see him dying away after 50 minutes, 60 minutes, and I think he was brought off pretty much every time around the hour mark. This is the first time where I think I've seen him, as that second half went on, he got stronger and stronger at holding the ball up, and this was part of it. 10 minutes to go, he's playing a 1-2, getting beyond that, getting beyond the defence, and then smashing a left foot strike right in the top corner.
Keeper was getting nowhere near that, was he? Probably put that in through sheer force of will, I think. Look, brilliant work from Brian Broby. That is what we paid the money for. He's, like you said, physical presence. He's put his cell about. He's grown into it. But then the presence of mind from both him and from Enzo Lefebvre in that move is just ridiculous. Like, the ball comes to Broby, and I think there's a slight element of luck when he plays the pass, because he sort of knocks it round the corner over his left shoulder, doesn't he? And it's a little aerial, and there's like a bit of spin on the ball. So there's a bit for Enzo to do. It's not like Broby's put it perfectly into him, ready for the 1-2. But just to have, like I say, the presence of mind to be aware that Lefebvre's there, and to play it and just go like he does on the turn as well, because he's got his back to goal at first. So he's got to play the pass, turn, and then start getting beyond the defenders while keeping an eye on Lefebvre, while keeping an eye on the ball. That deserves credit. Like you said, I mean, Lefebvre, the touch is like, it's just silly, isn't it? When you remember like what these lads have got in the locker, like, bloody hell. That was up there with his outside of the foot touch to skin Luke Ayling at the end of last season as well. It was brilliant. What a pass. And then Broby, but again, right, they both played good balls to each other. but whoever's received it has still had a fair bit to do. Like, it's not like Lafay's ball breaks in front of Robbie to run onto and just lash past the keeper. He's got to take a touch. It's slightly under him. He takes his touch and then it goes onto his wrong side, so it's on his left foot, not his right foot. But because of Robbie's spin and goal when he plays the first ball, he's already built up a bit of momentum to be able to get more power in his shot naturally. Whereas, is it Romero who's on him, or whichever defender it is anyway that's on Robbie's shoulder? He's got it all against him because not only is Robbie so big and strong, he's coming at him, he's already got a bit of momentum behind him, and it all just, it weaves together beautifully to create an absolutely sumptuous goal. That it really was. It was lovely to watch. And I think that, going back to that discussion we just had about chance creation, haven't we said as well, like, we've not created much from open play, have we? It's a lot of set pieces. How about that for an open play goal, eh?
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, he still had a lot to do with finish it. Certainly wasn't a 6-yard chance that he stuck away,
No.
and all that. He absolutely smashed it in. But yeah, and then, that was 1-1 after around 10 minutes, and I think there was about 5 minutes, 6 minutes stoppage time, something like that. But the game kind of played out where it looked like both sides were kind of quite happy to take the point in the end, which is weird. But I just wanted to talk about that quickly, Johnny, because I think in that first half, and this is the difference, I think, this year, that first half, away to a team like Spurs, and I mentioned in the preview, our record at Spurs is horrific, and obviously at White Hart Lane. But, looking at that first half performance, in our past years in the Premier League, Sunderland would have caved. Like, we would have been 2 or 3 down, but even if the opposition weren't playing that well, our heads would have just went down, and that would have been that. And we're talking about a performance where we're missing a number of our top players through AFCON, and we go to a place like Spurs, we're saying, well, it was a bit iffy for 45 minutes, and we're coming away with a point. And it's this kind of pride and it's this realization sometimes that we're a bloody good side and that we didn't cave. And in that first half, we were the better side. And, who knows, on a different day, could have nicked all 3 points.
Absolutely. And, we heard it all season, didn't we? You've got an easy set of fixtures to start the season. You've not played anyone yet. Come back in January or December, blah, blah, blah. That's now 4 games since players left for AFCON. We've conceded 2 goals and lost 0 games. We've taken 4 points out of those 4 games, which includes Man City, Tottenham, and Brighton. 2 of those away from home. This is not normal.
Yeah, no.
This is not what's this. Never mind Sunderland. This isn't what any club does. There's not a club in Europe right now who can claim to be doing anything on the level of what Sunderland are up to this season. It's absolutely staggering. We looked at that December and then in early January, didn't we? From a couple of months out where you think, oh, bloody hell, Sadiqi's good, we're going to miss him. And, what we're going to do without Talbi and Traore? Oh, no Ronaldo. And then, like you say, we've just rocked up when the games have come, when the going's gotten really, really tough as it'll get this season, hopefully. And they've rolled the sleeves up, they've battled, they've worked fucking hard, and they've come away with some really, really well-deserved points. And like you say, you go back to, whether it's the last Sunderland team who was in the Premier League or any of the iterations before that, really, I think you're spot on. We go 1-0 down there, the heads drop, it's 2 after another 5 minutes, it's 3 by half-time. It comes out in the second half. You're not getting anywhere near that response from Sunderland because by then the game would be done and dusted and we'd be already thinking about getting ourselves back up, to the hotel in time for a nice rest before Brentford. Never mind thinking, well, if we can get it to 70 minutes, get it to 75, you never know what could happen. And again, like the belief that runs through this team, it's almost tangible. You could feel in the second half as they were growing into the game, you could almost see them think to themselves, no, we're not losing this, are we? We're still taking something from this game. And it's that never say die attitude, which is so strikingly different from previous Sunderland teams, which is what's carrying us through these bitterly cold winter months of the season. Freudian slip there, I think.
Yeah, I've been drinking a lot, mate, over the whole this. But just on that last point on this, because look, eighth in the table, which is fantastic, 30 points, brilliant. But you look at the run and you look at the fact that we've won 2 in the last 10, and when we normally go on runs like that, you go, oh no, it's almost like, but this has been brilliant. I mean, we've won 2 games in 10 games, but in that 10 games, we've also only lost 2, Fulham and Manchester City. But that run's been we've loved every minute of it. Oh, well, almost. All right, you can give a half here, maybe Fulham or whatever. But, they take those out. But it's been fantastic. I mean, but the thing is, the point is, as in the game we're talking about, the Spurs game, you just know that after 90 minutes, after you watch it, you turn around and you go, the lads have put everything into that, and I'm proud of them.
This is the ultimate vindication for everyone who has said at any time we've had a team full of absolute clowns that we just want a team that tries. Because, like you say, if we'd had 2 wins in 10 under some of those previous regimes, you'd have had people absolutely howling. They'd have been battering down the walls of the stadium alike trying to demand change. But not only because of the attitudes of everybody involved with the club now being just light years ahead, also because if we'd only won 2 in 10 back in those days, we'd have probably lost 7 and maybe picked up 1 draw. Whereas now it's, well, we've only won 2, but we've also lost 2 as well, I think.
Yeah,
Fulham and Man City, like you say. So that's 2 wins and 6 draws and 2 losses, because this team has that grit and that determination and the ability to hang in there and win games. Because, listen, we can talk about effort and desire. They're also bloody good footballers, and it takes a lot of, discipline and game management to see some of the situations out that we've had to. But yeah, it goes to show you what amount of leeway you can buy for yourselves by showing the commitment up front, if you know what I mean. By buying in early and showing everybody what you mean, and that, you're here to stay. You earn the right to go through slightly leaner periods in the season, because everybody knows and everybody trusts that the wins will come again. Because if they keep playing like they have been, like you say, maybe the odd half here or there aside, but if they keep putting these levels of performances in, then the wins will come. Nobody's worried about that. It's just as important to not lose as it is to try and win sometimes. And the last few weeks are no better example of that statement than the past 4 games.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Johnny, 4th draw off the bounce. So I'm going to look at the odds on a draw against Brentford in midweek. So that's a fantastic place to end on. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much, Johnny, for the first pod I've done in 2026. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, and hopefully it's the first of many to come.
Yeah, that's it. Of course it will be. Every day, Johnny. Don't worry about that. But thanks again, everyone, for listening. Don't forget, we'll have more in-depth look at the game in the morning as well on with the rest of the lads, and we'll have loads of reaction on the Report website, of course. But from us, it's bye for now.